Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to our lunch and learn today. We've got a fantastic course on exclusions part two. For those of you who don't know, my name is Anthony DiUlio. I am an attorney in Philadelphia who practices entirely in the property damage space, handling claims all over the country when insurance companies don't do what they're supposed to do. One thing I'd say in all of my lunch and learns is that I really don't want to have to take a case. In a perfect world, insurance companies would always pay claims, they would do things the right way, and I wouldn't be needed. And I can say that pretty safely because the truth is we know they're not going to. But the goal of these lunch and learn courses is to try and provide additional information so that you don't have to call me. Really, in the end, with these claims, if you can find ways to get the appropriate information out there and present the claim the right way, understand the policy, you can be in a much better position to not have to really come to an attorney. But if you do need an attorney for any reason anywhere in the country, I am there to help. I've already answered, I think today, I try to keep track of this stuff. Today it was so far 7 messages, text messages from adjusters who have reached out and just said, hey, what can I do about these situations? What do I, what's the option I've got? And I help them out with it. Throughout the course, we are going to go through a number of items, but always remember you can ask questions live in the chat. One of the great reasons of doing this and sitting on these lunch and learns is so that you can have live questions answered. So please do not hesitate to jump in with any questions. I will try and keep an eye on things. As you'll notice, I've got this nice fake background behind me. My conference room is being used right now for a deposition, so I'm in my office, and rather than deal with the glare from the windows and all that fun stuff behind me, I've put the background up. So apologize for the fact that you keep seeing my headrest popping up behind me. All right, so with that being said, let's jump in. As always, we've got a lot of information for these webinars. If you've got questions that you've sent ahead of time, I've got them addressed in the end. But let's talk about this. As we've done in the past, I've always want to give you guys one of the most important things that I think you can have, which is my personal cell phone number and email. This information you can use anytime. And because you get my cell phone, that means you've got the right to bug me whenever you want. You can text me, call me, days, nights, weekends. I might not get back to you right away, but I will certainly try. And you can absolutely follow up. If I happen to miss you, you text me on Monday and I don't get back to you, you can text me back on Tuesday, and I'm happy to do whatever I can to get back to you. So please don't feel bad about, hey, Tony, I didn't hear back on that text. Feel free to follow up, but I will be trying to get back to those as quickly as I can. I also like to start these off with a quote. I'm sure a lot of you know about this quote from Franklin Roosevelt. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. It's really popular, but what some people don't realize is it actually is misquoted. The original quote is a little bit different, not too much, but just a little bit different from this. And I thought it was really apt and important for everyone to know exactly what that is. The only thing we have to fear is a desk adjuster improperly quoting an exclusion. So, Franklin Roosevelt was really ahead of his time when it came to understanding policies. This was the original quote, but like I said, it got misquoted a lot. But I thought you guys would be interested to know that. It's always so weird doing a joke, by the way, on these because you don't get any of the feedback. I always got to tell myself. So for those who don't know, this has been part of what I've called the Words Mattered series, or Words Matter series. The concept is we are breaking down homeowners insurance policies section by section, almost line by line, but not quite, to really understand these policies in depth. If you haven't watched the rest of the series, please go back and take a look. I think it's really fantastic. Thank you, David, for approving the joke. It does help and make me feel less silly when I do this. So the whole series talks about policies, and we're going to continue going through this for a little bit longer with these. So last time we talked about the beginning of the exclusion section. The exclusion section is such an important aspect to what we all handle and deal with on a day-to-day basis that it really isn't something I could just do in one session. So we split it into two. Last month we talked about kind of the framework of the exclusion section, how it all works together. We talked about some of the specific exclusions that come up in that kind of first section of exclusions, and some of the most common issues, things like earth movement, pollution. I forget some of the other stuff, but you should go back and check it out if you haven't. It's really valuable. The prior series we did also, I think, is absolutely worth watching through start to finish. I call it the Perfect Claim series. And it literally gets you from kind of becoming a public adjuster all the way through closing out the claim, step by step, what you should be doing with inspections, with letter drafting, with arguing. I mean, I really tried to go in depth, so please go check it out. This week, we're talking about the rest of the exclusion section. We're going to spend a good amount of time on the wear and tear exclusion because that one comes up, and if I had to guess, is the most quoted denial section for any denial letter by a carrier. We're going to talk a little bit more about the ensuing loss language and how that interplays with a lot of these exclusions, and then some other specifics for different areas within the policy that we're going to be talking about as well. I wonder if I can, you know what, if I make this an overlay, I'm doing a quick test, it cuts me out a little bit more. I wonder, you guys can see that all your hilarious, the comments that keep things going. But what I can do, here we go. I'll pop them up one by one. So theft versus vandalism. This is one of the ones that comes up often with claims when there's copper pipes taken from homes, when there is a property where there's tenants within that property, and they have some vagrants come in and cause some problems. And this is a question I've asked many times in the past and gotten answers. Some of you have probably already heard me ask this, but if you've got copper pipes that are cut from the property and then taken away by an unknown third party, is that theft or is it vandalism? It's, I've had a lot of arguments of where it really falls, because cutting the pipes out, purposely causing damage to a property is the definition of vandalism, but then they're taking them away, which is obviously theft. So where does this fall in the grand scheme of coverage? And the answer is really very simple. It's whichever is covered. So when you've got these claims and you understand what is and what is not covered, you can make sure that you're presenting it in the right way. And obviously I do joke a little bit about this, but it can truly fall under both coverages, so you can present it accordingly. And let me explain that a little bit with the language itself. So this is from the traveler's policy: theft in or to a dwelling under construction, or of materials and supplies for use in the construction until the dwelling is finished or occupied. So if you've got a contractor in your house doing work, you've had to leave for one reason or another, and a theft occurs, you're not covered for the theft to that building as a result of it being under construction. However, the vandalism exclusion is a little different. Vandalism and malicious mischief, including arson and any ensuing loss caused by any intentional or wrongful act committed in the course of the vandalism or malicious mischief, that's a tongue twister, if the dwelling has been vacant for more than 60 consecutive days immediately before the loss. Vacant means substantially empty of personal property necessary to sustain normal occupancy. Here's the key: a dwelling being constructed is not considered vacant. So you've got a case where you are having a major renovation done to your home. Maybe you're adding a second floor. You're out of your home for 3 months to get the project done, and somebody comes in on the third month and steals a ton of stuff from your property, including the copper pipes, which they've cut from the property, causing damage. You've got no coverage for that theft, because the property under the theft provision, again, indicates that during the course of construction you don't have coverage for theft. But you've got coverage for vandalism and any ensuing loss caused by any intentional or wrongful act committed in the course of the vandalism or malicious mischief. So if they are coming in to steal copper pipes and they steal other items in your home, the vandalism triggers coverage because the property isn't vacant. And then you've got other intentional acts, and you can make an argument for the theft as well. So You've got to make sure you understand this in these policies so that you're presenting them the right way. This issue, obviously, it's a little more nuanced, but I'm presenting it because of the really important issue that comes up in all of these talks of reading the effing policy, the full policy. Sorry, that's what the F is for full. So RTFP, read the full policy. It's so important that you're doing this on every claim. If you're not doing it, you're doing a disservice to your insureds by not having a full grasp. The policies are not all the same. All right, so let's jump in to wear and tear. Now, if someone can tell me a more commonly cited exclusion within a policy, please do. But I'm pretty confident because almost every denial letter I've received quotes this language. Now, whether or not it is the most important reason they're denying the claim or just some additional language they throw in because they just like to throw the kitchen sink, it is ultimately cited in so many denial letters. And truthfully, it is almost never the actual cause or cause of loss to a property, and should not be cited in the denial letter. There are, of course, a few situations where wear and tear does play a part. The easiest one being the plumbing system of a home where a plumbing line breaks. Truth is, there's only really 3 reasons that plumbing lines break in properties and cause damage. Number 1 is wear and tear, right? Things are long-term wear to a pipe. Cast iron breaks down over 50, 100 years, and you're going to get a leak. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. That is wear and tear. It is not covered by the policy. The other 2 ways that pipes break are improper construction or frozen pipes. That's really about it, short of, strike that, vandalism. We just talked about another one. But those are about it. Those are the only reasons it happens. But other aspects of losses really don't involve, or wear and tear doesn't really matter for almost every other type of claim. And the key concept that I want you to understand is this but-for test. The but-for concept is something that lawyers learn when they're in law school when trying to determine things like causation for lawsuits, but it applies just as much to insurance claims and potentially even more. And what you need to ask yourself is, would this loss have occurred on this day, at this time, and at this location, but for X factor, right? So think of storm damage to a roof. It's the really easy one. You've got a roof that is 40 years old. It's got 25-year shingles, way past their life expectancy. They are beat to hell. The granules are nearly non-existent. The seals are partially broken. Who knows what else? There's some moss growing in areas. It could be just in absolute utter mayhem of a roof, but it's insured. It's doing its job. It is protecting the property from the elements despite its age. And then a storm comes by and you lose 45 shingles from 2 slopes of your roof, and there's significant other damage as a result. An insurance company comes out and they say, look, I'm so sorry. This roof is way past its life expectancy. It's the result of wear and tear. The storm, it was only 20-mile-an-hour winds. That wouldn't normally damage your roof. That's not the cause. The cause is the wear and tear. And you need to ask yourself this but-for test question. And this is what you should be presenting to the insurance company as well. So, Mr. or Mrs. Insurance Adjuster, would this loss have happened on March 15th, 2024, if it weren't for the storm? In other words, would all of these shingles have fallen off the house at this time, at this place, and at this moment if it weren't for the storm? Or is it because they fell off at this time in this place because of the wear and tear? And the answer is that only one of those caused it to happen at this moment, at this time, and to this severity, and it is the storm. That's the test for what caused something to happen at a property. Just because wear and tear is involved in some form or fashion doesn't make it excluded, because that's not what caused the damage here. The cause of the damage is the storm. I hope that makes sense, because once you start to wrap your head around this concept of the but-for test, it really makes a difference when understanding how to present the claim to the carrier. And you can go back and say, look, I know there's wear and tear to the property. I know this roof is 40 years old and it's a 25-year shingle and it's beat to hell. I get all that, but that's not the cause of the loss. And I want to take a look at some of this policy language to show you why this plays out this way under any given claim. So here's some of the traveler's language for wear and tear, and you can see that it falls, like many policies, falls within this kind of uh, all-encompassing multiple causes of loss section of the policy, where it just lists a whole bunch of things under one letter or number, so that it kind of includes a whole bunch of stuff. And when carriers deny a claim, when for example, when Travelers sends denial letters for wear and tear, they will often include this entire section, all of A through H. And you get it, and you're like, wait a second, this is a wind claim. What the hell does smog, rust, and corrosion have anything to do with this, or birds and vermin and rodents? It doesn't make any sense to me. But they just do it because they've got a little key in feature of cite this exclusion, and it puts all of it in there. But you take a look at this, and you've got to recognize that there's other language that matters when it comes to almost every wear and tear provision in almost every single policy. And sometimes they're easy to find, like in the traveler's policy, and sometimes they're harder to find, like in the Allstate one, but they all have similar concepts. And if you take a look at this exception to C6, and just take a note back, we're looking in section 6 of the policy. I'll just represent to you as under C. So this is C6 of the policy. Unless the loss is otherwise excluded, we cover loss to property covered under A and B, resulting from accidental discharge or overflow of water or steam, and continues down for this water exclusion. But then it goes even further. And if you keep reading this very last paragraph under 2B and C above, again, remember, we're in C6, so it's under section C above, any ensuing loss to property described in coverages A and B, not excluded by any other provision of this policy, is covered. So Travelers breaks it down, as many do, into two different portions. They first do a give back for water damage, and that's for the plumbing claims. Really, you've got the plumbing line we talked about, wear and tear to the pipe, breaks, causes water, you're covered. It's duplicative because, to be honest, under 2B and C, you've got the coverage anyway for that ensuing loss language, but that's what the first part is. The second part is for the catch-all ensuing loss language. This language, in essence, says if you've got an excluded provision within the policy, like wear and tear, if something else happens that causes the actual damage, right, the ensuing loss, the ensuing damage, i.e. the shingles falling off of your house, you're not covered, or you're covered for it, I'm sorry. And what this means, the whole reason this all started way back in the day, and way before my time, but I've done enough research on this to figure it out. Wear and tear, this provision was added because the famous line, insurance policies aren't maintenance policies, is what they were trying to exclude. You don't get to go to your insurance company and say, oh man, I've got this really beat to hell roof. It's past its life expectancy. It's worn and torn and beat, it's got signs of problems all over it. I'm making a claim, right? You can't do that. There's no, the aspect of that wear and tear is not covered. But the reason the ensuing loss provision existed was, look, insureds of the world, we recognize your property is going to wear and tear over time. That's not covered. But if something else happens to that worn and torn stuff in your home that was otherwise acting the way it's supposed to act, you're covered for that. That is something we're going to cover because a storm comes by and causes damage, or water leaks and causes a loss. And if you start to recognize this when you present it to the carrier and say, look, be upfront about it. I know this is an old roof, guys, but because of this concept of ensuing loss, because of this but-for test, the only reason we're here today is because of the storm, not because of the wear and tear. That is what can really change the tides when looking at these policies and getting coverage for things that might otherwise not be covered. So let's take a look at another policy, Allstate. Allstate similarly has this kind of catch-all under number 5 of things that aren't covered. It's really, in a lot of ways, nearly identical to the traveler's language, but Allstate is a little bit different because of how they do their add back. They don't have, after the section, just a standard ensuing loss provision like everybody else has. They've got the similar language of A through F causing water or steam for the plumbing leaks, but then they do something a little different. And in paragraph C, and we talked about this last time a little bit, they indicate that when loss is not excluded under paragraph A or B, losses we do not cover, and there are 2 or more causes of loss to covered property, we do not cover the loss if the predominant cause of losses are excluded under paragraph D immediately below. So let me give a little context. Paragraph D is where this section for wear and tear applies. So what they have is, if there is a predominant cause of loss, i.e. the but-for cause of loss is the exclusion, you're not covered. But if you've got wear and tear and the predominant cause of loss, i.e. the but-for cause is wind, now you've got coverage. I hope that makes sense, because again, Allstate and some other carriers are a little bit different with this. They've got this language for predominant cause of loss, but all that means is that but-for cause. It's one of the reasons it's so important to truly understand it. I hope this is making sense. If it's not, please ask questions, because again, this is really important. And it's not, I want to be clear on how important. You need to be able to explain this to the adjusters on the other side, right? They need to understand these positions, because you've got to present it to them in a way that allows them to provide coverage for these losses. All right, so keep moving forward on these. Let's take a look at one more and have it be State Farm. Now, State Farm, in some similar fashion, I'm going to move myself down a little bit because this got cut off a little on the sides, has all under one letter a whole bunch of things like wear, tear, decay, marring, scratching, deterioration. I'm going to talk about those in a second. They, however, have the ensuing loss language following it. We will pay for any resulting loss for items A through L unless the resulting loss is itself a loss not insured as described in this section. So all this means is, just like everybody else, if that second cause of loss comes in and actually causes damage, just because it's worn and torn doesn't mean it's not covered. I want to give you guys an example. And this is what you should be doing when you're drafting your letters and presenting the claims. And you need to ask the adjusters on site, okay, we all agree this roof is 40 years old, right? Perfect. We all agree this roof has wear and tear. Beat to hell. If this house burnt down yesterday, would you have covered the roof? Would you have covered the shingles? And the answer is unequivocally yes. Of course we would have, because fire caused the damage to the roof and we're covering the fire. Thank you so much. Now, if wind damages the roof, do you cover the roof? And the answer that they're all of a sudden going to come to is, oh, yeah, I guess you're right? The wear and tear does not stop us from covering the otherwise covered damages, right? The otherwise covered causes of loss. They like to use it that way, but that's simply not how these claims are truly represented when dealing with the ensuing loss provisions. So use these examples, use something like that, use similar aspects that are obvious to them, right? Obvious answers of, yes, of course I would cover a fire, to get this covered as well. The other one that comes up or is coming up more and more often are these concepts of marring or scratching or deterioration. What are those really meaning, right? What is marring or scratching or deterioration? And if you ever look up the definition of marring, it's something really, really ridiculously broad, like, affecting the appearance of something. Every loss that I think has ever existed in some form or fashion is marring, but that's not what they're really talking about here. Again, this wear and tear provision, and what the case law is pretty strong in supporting, is really talking about the things that just naturally will happen over time and through regular use. And that's important, because that concept of regular use, expected wear and tear, makes wear and tear different than what carriers sometimes want it to be. Let me give you an example. You've got a property. I don't know if I talked about this in the last class or a few before. You've got a property that is being rented to tenants. And you come in after the tenants leave and you find the place is just destroyed. There are, drawings on the wall. They've got hammer holes through the drywall. The doors are cracked up through from someone running into it too hard. The cabinet doors are halfway pulled off their hinges. I mean, the place, I'm sure you can picture the type of place I'm talking about. And carriers come in on a regular basis and say, I'm so sorry, this is wear and tear. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not wear and tear at all. That is well beyond the normal wear and tear to a property. Now, here's the issue. It's also not vandalism. And everybody, when they present these claims, presents them as vandalism. But it's not. It's just not wear and tear. In these all risk policies, you don't need it to be vandalism, nor is it vandalism, because you can't necessarily prove they were doing it on purpose to cause damage to the property. But you can prove it's not normal wear and tear. And when you do that, when you can go in and say, look, this isn't when you have wear and tear, you expect your floors maybe to lose a little bit of their finish where people are walking more commonly. You might expect a spill or a stain on a carpet that is in an eating area. You might expect this normal wear and tear type stuff, but you do not expect this condition of the property when it comes back in. So when you present the loss, present it simply as, look, this is just physical damage to the property. This is accidental direct physical loss, period. That's what this is. I don't have to call it vandalism. I don't have to call it, wear and tear. I don't have to call it anything. It's just direct physical loss. And when it's direct physical loss, that burden shifts to the carrier, right? It becomes their burden to prove that it is wear and tear. And they're not going to be able to do that really under a microscope because they're going to recognize this isn't the normal wear and tear. There was a question from Tom. State Farm will dig their heels in the sand and never pull their denial back. Is there any case law in particular public adjusters can cite? Depending on the issue, Tom, there are cases that can be cited by public adjusters. Now, there's always this question of, well, wait a second, they're not lawyers. They shouldn't be citing case law. That's not true. You can cite case law and then simply say, look, it appears that State Farm has not done X, Y, and Z thing. What you want to generally avoid, just to always be safe, is to avoid saying that they are violating law, right? You don't want to come in and say, State Farm, you're acting in bad faith. State Farm, you're violating the Unfair Claims Practice Act. Those things can be questionable. What you can do is cite a case or cite the Unfair Claims Settlement Practices Act and to have it say, look, State Farm, the Unfair Claims Settlement Practice Act says you must respond within 10 days. State Farm, you've not responded within 10 days. That's it. You've now done what you're allowed to do because you're citing what the Unfair Claims Practice Act is. You're saying what State Farm didn't do. What you don't need to say is, hey, State Farm, as a result, you're violating the Unfair Claims Practice Act, or State Farm, as a result, you're acting in bad faith, right? You don't need to take that step. And it's the same with case law. If you're looking for a specific case, you can say, hey, under, this particular case in Pennsylvania, you can't refuse a scope of appraisal. The whole thing goes to appraisal. State Farm, you've attempted to limit the appraisal. We are renewing our demand that the entire loss go to appraisal. Fantastic. You're allowed to do that. And you don't have any risk of claiming that you're practicing law. If there's a specific thing, Tom, that you're looking for, shoot me a text and I'm happy to help out. All right. So let's keep going. We talked about the marring and decay. We did that. All right. One person, by the way, when I had this in court, he expressed, he always explained it very simply. He's got his car and his wife has their engagement ring. And when she unlocks the car back in the day, by the way, when you had to unlock it with a key and you put the key in, a few scratches over time just started showing up on the car. That's marring. That's scratching. If someone comes by and keys my car, that's direct physical loss. Right? That's the distinction of kind of what's expected and normal through the use of something versus what is actually direct physical loss under a policy. All right. A few other exclusions before I get into the questions, because there were a good number of questions that came in ahead of time and a few other things I want to go over. But one of the other ones that comes up all the time is improper/negligent construction. So take a look at the travelers. And I realized, by the way, I didn't change how this language changes everything. That applies to the ensuing loss, not the improper construction. Never mind. Improper and negligent construction. Almost every policy excludes improper construction. You've got a contractor who comes out to your house and they do a really bad job putting your roof on. You don't get a new roof because they did a bad job putting your roof on. If they put the roof on badly and now all of a sudden I have water that comes into my property, you've got coverage for the ensuing water damage to the property. So let's talk about how this plays out. In improper negligent construction, we do not insure for any of the following: weather conditions, acts or decisions, faulty, inadequate, defective planning, zoning, development, surveying, site design, materials used in repair, construction, renovation. All of these are excluded, or improper maintenance. Great. As I explained, the work itself is not covered. However, that resulting damage, as long as you have ensuing loss coverage, which I can't think of a policy right now that doesn't, but most policies have ensuing loss coverage for improper or faulty workmanship. You still have coverage for that. The second thing that everyone needs to recognize is the improper/negligent construction needs to be from the time the construction was done, not today's standards. This comes up. I've had a number of cases, and it shocks me every time, where a carrier will come back and say, oh, no, this happened because it was improper construction. And it's really popular in stucco cases. Everyone knows that stucco, when it was put on back in the 90s, I think even the early or late 80s, but in the 90s and even early 2000s, stucco was being put on improperly all across the country. It was really, they didn't have proper spacing behind for the drainage. They didn't have the weep screeds probably. I mean, it was a whole bunch of stuff that they didn't have. And it causes a lot of problems long-term for stucco. At the time, there was absolutely nothing improper with the way they were doing it. Codes have since changed, but they don't look at codes now to determine if it was improper construction. They have to look at codes back then. And one of the best examples I have of this is I had a case that actually went all the way through summary judgment when we were successful, where the carrier was trying to deny a property in Philadelphia that was built in 1908. The loss was in 2017, and they said that it was improper construction. And I said, you guys are batshit crazy for trying to deny a claim for a property built in 1908 for improper construction, because you've got to prove to me that it was improper in 1908, and there's no way on God's green earth you can do that. Luckily, the court agreed and said, look, there's absolutely no evidence it was improper construction. And by the way, carrier, you're even crazier for this because this property has stood without issue for over 100 years. How do you possibly claim that it was improper if it was okay for over 100 years of use and occupancy in this city? So recognize that fact, because when you go back and look at some of these losses for improper and negligent construction, you're going to see that if you look back to the way it was then, the carrier has to prove it was improper when it was done, not based off of today's standards. Again, I hope that makes some level of sense, because it really can make a difference in arguing these claims. This is another one. The all-state language, relatively identical in its concept. I won't spend or belabor a lot of time on it, because all of these carriers, including State Farm, have nearly identical language. State Farm, I did include the language of the ensuing loss. So if you take a look at the very bottom, we will pay for any resulting loss from items 3A, 3B, and 3C unless the resulting loss is itself a loss not insured. So this gets us again to the ensuing loss language and understanding that relationship between the but-for cause of the loss. If you have any questions about this, not only do you can you put the question in the side, but you can also come back and ask me. Another one we haven't gotten to talk about is ordinance and law. There are exclusions in almost every single policy out there for ordinance and law. I'm going to give you the briefest background, but really what you should do is go back and take a watch of my video. I did an entire lunch and learn just on ordinance and law coverage because it was such a big topic for people. People had asked me to do it, so it's on there. You can check out the Facebook page or YouTube to go back and watch any of these videos. They're also on our website, but you go back and take a look. But here's the really important stuff to pull out in kind of the tiniest elevator pitch. Number one, ordinance and law coverage was originally designed so that when codes changed, people couldn't put a claim in saying, oh, my property's not up to code. You need to now fix it. This is an insurance claim. So you have knob and tube wiring in your home. All of a sudden, codes come out saying knob and tube is no longer permissible. Hey, insurance company, give me money. That's not how this works. What ordinance and law does not prevent is when a loss happens, a contractor saying there's only one way I'm allowed to do this. That's what you owe me for. That's not ordinance and law coverage, ladies and gentlemen. That is just repairability of a property. Again, easy examples for people to understand when you're talking to carriers. You have asbestos tiles in your bathroom and there's a loss. Carrier, are you going to pay me and require me to put back asbestos tiles? No, of course you're not, because it's insane. They don't even make asbestos tiles anymore and nobody can come back and do that. You're going to pay me for the equivalent now, some level of ceramic that's going to go back on the floor. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate that. How is that any different than if you have sheathing on your roof that is beat to hell and have a roof claim that has 1/2 inch ply and now you need 3/4 as a result of code? There's no difference, carrier, none whatsoever. You just don't like it because it costs more money. That's it. That's the only basis they've got. So you've got to make sure you understand that. If you want more in-depth information on that, go back and check out the video. It was a pretty good one and it got some good feedback. If you've got any questions, let me know. All right, before we get into the questions, your big takeaways from all of this. Number one, RTFP, read the full policy. Being politically correct there. So read the effing policy. If you don't read the policy, you aren't doing your job. I don't know how many times I have to say it. I still get adjusters who send me claims and they don't have the policy first and foremost, or they haven't read the policy. I just got one the other day. I'm not going to say names from anybody, but it was raccoon damage to a property. Everyone agrees they trapped the raccoon. It was clear as day. And the carrier has an exclusion within their policy for animal damage. And it isn't one of those ones that says rodents, mice, or other similar animals, or whatever it is. Because in those cases, you've got an argument for raccoon damage. But this one just said animals. And they sent me the claim. They said, hey, this should be a good one. Are you willing to take it? I wrote back and said, how are you going to get around this exclusion? And they send back, oh, I've got all this research about how raccoons are part of the bear family, and they're not rodents and all this stuff. So this policy just has an animal exclusion. And they write back and say, oh, I didn't, I guess there's no way to fight it then. What? How is it taking to the point of you've done all this work? By the way, the adjusters have inspected, they've done estimates, they've taken photographs, they've wasted time, candidly, going over this claim when there is a crystal clear exclusion within the policy. When that happens, you've really got to question yourself. Okay, why am I not doing this? You're wasting everybody's time, including your own. So read the policy. The cause of a loss matters, not the effect of the loss. We went over this last time with earth movement. We had a wall in a basement where the wall had collapsed in because of wear and tear over time. That wear and tear under the policy is excluded unless it causes a collapse and the wear and tear was hidden from view. Fantastic. No one knew about this damage, the kind of the joints breaking down in this wall. There was no cracking, no signs of it, but it collapsed in. Everyone agrees it was a collapse. As a result, the earth moved and, you see clear dirt in the basement, but that resulting earth movement wasn't the cause of my loss, and it could not be excluded as a matter of law, according to the courts and according to the policy. So Don't get confused by carriers who say, oh, look, there's earth movement, you're not covered. That's not the case. The effect of a cause of damage doesn't mean that that isn't in fact covered. The but-for questions help determine exclusions. Hopefully, I mean, it's one of the biggest things I want to be pushing through this one. You guys understand that concept now that we've talked about it. Would the loss have happened when and where? I spelled where wrong. So I had wear and tear in my head so much from writing this. I used the wear and tear version of where instead of the locational where. Would it happen when and where it did, but for the X cause? That is the biggest takeaway I think you can have from this lunch and learn today. So hopefully you got it. Always prevent just what is covered and express that you aren't claiming the excluded items. You can avoid losses and denials if you openly tell them in writing and in person, hey, I want to make sure you know I'm not claiming rot. I'm not claiming mold. I'm only claiming water damage. Right? Don't waste your time sending me a letter that says you're not covering rot and deterioration and decay. I'm not claiming it. I'm just claiming the water damage. Because what the carriers try over and over is they say, hey, so sorry, the loss involves rot and mold, not covering. I'm not claiming it. It is no different, by the way, than the wear and tear issue. Easy example. If you take a look at one of my walls, there's a ding in the wall over there. Which is where I honestly have no idea what caused it, but not covered. Wear and tear. Fine. That wall burns to the ground. It doesn't matter that there's wear and tear to that wall. Has no effect. That wall's covered. The roof, wear and tear, burns to the ground, covered. If that wall gets water damage from a covered loss, the carrier's never going to deny it because there's, a ding in the wall. But all of a sudden, if there's rot, if there's mold, and water damage happens, they're denying the loss. It has no bearing on the water coverage. No different in any way, shape, or form. So recognize that. Admit it up front, because then you front it before that denial comes, and you've got a much better chance at coverage. I tell everybody the best way to overturn a denial is before it happens. So present it the right way. Present it that you're not claiming those damages, and do it in writing, and you've got a better chance of never getting that denial in the first place. All right, so we've got a number of questions that came through. As always, I try to address all of the questions. I'm realizing now as I'm about to click through these, I forgot to reorder them. I normally put the ones that aren't as relevant to the topic later in the thing. I forgot to reorder them, so bear with me. But there's a number of good ones that came up, and I really enjoyed this first one the most. And I copied the text because I didn't want you guys thinking that I was trolling you. But the question was, explain trolling. I'm pretty confident they meant tolling. I think that's in our world that matters more. But it really made me laugh that they decided to go with explain trolling. What's really ironic about this is if they did mean to have me explain trolling, then they're trolling, which the irony of that is not lost on me. So tolling is steps taken to put things on pause, like statutes of limitations or suit limitation provisions. This has come up recently, and I'll get through this relatively quickly. If you have a suit limitation provision in your policy that is coming up soon, you should have your clients or yourself request a tolling agreement to pause that timer, to say, hey, we're going to stop the counter. We're not going to rely on the 1-year suit limitation, and we're going to toll. We're going to move out that statute of limitations time to make sure that we can continue to adjust this loss. It is the absolute first step you should take in every claim when the suit limitation is getting close. If they say no, then you talk to an attorney and talk to them immediately. Please, please, please do not wait until the day before, candidly, even the week before your statute's about to run up before you call an attorney. It's very frustrating to have to go through that process, if need be, if you wait that long. So get your tolling agreement not your trolling agreement, your tolling agreement, so that you can pause that timer. And by the way, save the expenses and legal work for the client so that they can get this thing resolved. Another one, and again, I apologize that this wasn't at the end, and I'll make the answer quick. On a forced place policy, how to get the full policy and cooperation of the insurance company and the mortgage company, and what to do if they do not cooperate. Forced place policies are tough, ladies and gentlemen, because in that case, the mortgage company is the named insured. You have really two legitimate options here. Option number one is you get in touch with the mortgage company and you get their go ahead to cooperate in the claim. It is really hard to do that. Option two is in most forced place policies, the insureds are named as an additional insured under that forced place policy. And what you need to understand and recognize is that forced place policies can still cover the insured's own property over and above the mortgage amount if the policy limits allow them. Let me give you an example. Mortgage on a property is $200,000. The property value is $400,000, and the policy limits are $350,000. In that scenario, there is $150,000 of policy limits that are truly only owned and represented by the insured, because the mortgage company has no interest in that. It's why they're named as an additional insured, and you can represent the insured for that $150,000 all day, every day. There's nothing wrong with you continuing to adjust the rest of the claim, and there's arguments to be made about unjust enrichment for the mortgage company if you are successful in getting the claim resolved, but that's stuff that comes further down the line. There is very little you can do to force the cooperation of a mortgage company. Mortgage companies, in a lot of respects, and I don't say this lightly, candidly, but they're worse than insurance companies. They are impossible to communicate with. You never can talk to the same person twice. They don't give two shits about pretty much anything other than getting their payments. So it's hard to force anything from them. But you can still represent the claim to the amount of interest that the property owner has. And even if they don't, you can still do it. But there are going to be risks in that, because you might not end up getting paid very easily if you don't have an agreement with the mortgage company moving forward. Okay, so now for ones that are a little more on point. Regarding exclusions, I understand some exclusions. Is O&P and supervisory hours also considered excluded in certain policies? Number one, RTFP. Number two, I can't think of a particular exclusion for overhead and profit or supervisory hours that I think I've ever seen, but could be in there. Probably more likely in a business or commercial policy. I've never seen it in homeowners for sure. O&P and supervisory hours is really just a question of estimating the loss, right? It's more a question of equivalent to labor hours of a plumber to do something, or an electrician or a roofer, and it would be accordingly. So there's no exclusion for it that I'm aware of, but you definitely want to read the policy and work accordingly. I can't tell you how many questions came in on hail. I might have put one or two of them in here, but there were a whole lot, so I didn't put them all. I have a hail claim for a roof that is being denied, and their reason is wear and tear and weathering. My question is, how weathering related to wear and tear? How is weathering related to wear and tear for a denial? A roof, I'll make this really simple. A roof can be 40 years old. It can be that beat up piece of crap roof that we were talking about before. If hail comes by and damages that property and causes granule loss, causes shingles to get chipped, causes shingles to be lost during the storm, whatever the case may be, that is a covered claim. For the exact same reason that we have explained at length, and I probably sound like a broken record, that specific damage on that specific day does not happen if that storm does not occur. So you can get a lot of ahead of this by explaining it before the denial comes. I will tell you, what I'm teaching, what I go through in these courses, I'm not saying it is going to work 100% of the time. I'm not even telling you it's going to work 50% of the time. But if it changes 20 or 30 or 40% of your claims, it's worth presenting it. And some of them are still going to have to go to legal. It's unfortunate. It's just the nature of the business, though. So if you've got this situation and they're refusing to come back, if I were you, I would get a roofer to write a report that indicates the hail damage. If the claim is valuable enough, I would get an engineer out there to indicate it. But we all know once that denial is out there, once they've already done their inspections, getting them to change their mind can be really difficult. So you want to be doing this beforehand, presenting it to them so they've got an easier path to coverage. So David Kilroy just wrote, they're now calling hail damage wear and tear, not concurrent damage. Well, that's insane. If they actually are trying, I've never seen that. I've never seen them say that hail damage is wear and tear. What I've seen them say is, no, what you're looking at isn't from hail. This is just, granule loss over time kind of thing. That's really hard arguments to make when their granule loss happens to be this size and only in scattered portions of the roof as a result of hail. But it is nevertheless covered. If hail hit it, it's not wear and tear. It's like saying wind damage is wear and tear. So you do have fights, but make those fights before the denial letter comes. You want to have your claim package together with causation, with estimates before that inspection even happens with the carrier. The less work you make the carrier do to get coverage, the better and easier it is to get it. What if it's hidden? Now, because the push on this webinar has been wear and tear, I'm going to assume they mean what if the wear and tear is hidden? But there was no clarification from the person who asked this question. You got to read the policy. Short version is there are certain times that hidden things are covered and there are certain times that hidden things aren't covered, and it does vary carrier to carrier. There are a number of carriers who say things like, hey, water damage that occurs for 14 days or more is not covered unless it's hidden from view within the walls and ceilings of the property. By the way, those are the policies that you want to be pushing with your clients because those are the better carriers. But otherwise, there's case law out there that isn't very favorable regarding the hidden coverages. So if there's hidden damages, if you've got hidden water and the policy doesn't have that carve out, you're going to have some uphill battles. It's not something that I'm saying I wouldn't fight or it's not worth taking, but just know that it's going to be more difficult. When it comes to wear and tear that's hidden, you're still not going to be covered for wear and tear really under any policy unless it triggers something else like collapse. Wear and tear that causes collapse is covered if the wear and tear was hidden from view. So again, as with everything else, read the policy. How do we get around State Farm period of time leaks for shower pans? Ladies and gentlemen, for those who don't know, I love State Farm, and I say that very sarcastically. State Farm is, in my opinion, the worst carrier out there right now. They are denying the mass majority of claims that shouldn't be denied, and this issue is kind of my, I don't want to say white whale, it is one of the most frustrating ones we deal with. State Farm has a period of time language saying they don't cover leaks that occur over a period of time. If anyone can tell me what the hell that means, I'll pay you a significant sum of money. But truthfully, it just means whatever State Farm wants it to mean. Here's what you can know. Number one, other carriers that have leaks that occur for 14 days or more, the first 13 days are covered. Limit your damages to those first 13 days. Proclaim that you are only claiming the first 13 days of damage, and they're going to have a lot harder time denying you for those long-term leak provisions. With State Farm, what you want to do is ask them, hey, State Farm, how long did this leak have to be occurring for it to have been denied? If it was only 1 day, would that be enough to be covered? What if it was going on for 3 days? They're not going to be able to answer the question. And truth is, there's not much you're going to be able to do to overturn it, but it makes the attorney's life a lot easier when they need to fight it after the fact. The other aspect you need to recognize, because these shower pan leaks often happen in older homes, just because there are things like rotted boards doesn't mean the rot was from this loss. The boards might have been, good enough for a contractor to build over. For all we know, the bathroom was renovated 25 years ago over that rot. It just got wet again. You've got to make the carrier prove the rot was from this claim, not from something older in the past. And that can help get you over a few of these issues. Last two. USAA has a claim where a quarter of the roof is being paid for, including hips, ridges, skylights. But the shingle has proven to be discontinued, and the adjuster states policy language, we do not pay to repair, replace products damaged, outdated, etc. How would you overcome this situation? State Farm would have approved this by now. I first of all found it terribly entertaining that USAA is giving the hard time, and State Farm, the concept being State Farm would have covered it. I know USAA has gotten worse over the years. They're not the company they were 10 years ago, but the State Farm would likely be doing the same thing. Here's your argument. It comes down to repairability. It's not about mismatch. Mismatch is almost always a loser when it comes to arguing these losses. However, repairability of shingles is incredibly important. Dimensions changed on shingles, I don't know, 10 years ago, give or take. They went from English to metric. And as a result, they cannot just be kind of woven in together anymore. So you need to start focusing on the repairability issues of these roofs as a result of the differing shingles, not the mismatch of them. So if you go in with a repairability concept of, look, I don't care that they're a different color. I mean, some policies that helps because they've got matching provisions, but generally, I don't care that they're different colors. What I care about is no roofer can fix this roof given the shingles that are up there right now. It's just not possible. This has nothing to do with matching. It has nothing to do with they're out of date or not. They just can't be done. And that's going to be your stronger argument if you can find repairability issues as to this stuff. Last question before the final slide. What about when a wear and tear exclusion denial has an engineer report supporting it? Here's what I can tell you. You guys are in the field and you certainly see more claims on a day-to-day basis than I do. And you see the claims that go well. I rarely see the claims that go well because it just doesn't come across my desk. I've never heard of a case where a carrier has an engineer involved, they send a denial, and then they change their mind. I would open up this to anyone who's listening. If that has happened, more power to you. But I've never seen them get an engineer, deny a loss, and then change their mind after. So if they're at that stage, all you can do is document the file and send it to legal. It's really not going to be much more. I will tell you this. If you want to call me and discuss it, and if we can come up with ideas to try and get it changed, I'm all for it, but it's going to be really, really difficult in an uphill battle. Just wanted to, there was two other things that came in, Howard, not a question, but a story. Carrier denied wind damage for a fence claim, citing wear and tear based on photographs from Eagle View dated from 2003, 20 years ago. Google search showed the fence was actually partially repaired 3 months prior. Cannot stress, you guys need to be looking at Google Maps when you guys have exterior claims. The carriers will look at Google Maps, the street views, both historic and current, for that property. Do the same. Do not make a fool of yourself by claiming shingle damage if it shows up on the roof from 3 years prior in a Google Earth image. Check it out. It can also, just like it helped Howard in this case, can help overturn claims when they recognize it is in fact covered. Mike has said he's overturned 4 engineer reports so far. Mike, let's see. I would love to find out how. Please reach out to me, because the more we can provide to these people to help do that themselves, the better it is for the industry as a whole. So please share. Chris came in and talks about 2 similar water damage cases with hidden damage. These were situations, and only so much of your comment can come up, but if the policy has the hidden provision, there is a coverage. He says, in essence, the policy says hidden damage is covered, even if it's been occurring for a period of weeks, months, or years. However, as soon as the damage is discovered, both carriers took the position that it is no longer hidden and have denied coverage accordingly. So essentially, the damage is only covered if it's unknown, and once it's known, it's not covered. That sounds nuts to me, because if what you're saying is, if I'm gathering this, once they realized that there was a problem, it all of a sudden becomes not covered, is insane. That's illusory coverage, because you have to know about it to make a claim for it. So to the extent that's accurate, and we're reading this right, Chris, please give me a call, shoot me a text, and we'll talk about that. Steve's final comment before I turn this to our final slide is, we can only fight engineer reports with our own engineers. I agree completely. But even when, in my scenarios, the cases that I see, even when the insured gets their own engineer, still doesn't change the opinion of the other engineer. Again, I could be wrong about that, because at least I forget who now made the comment. Oh, Mike. Mike made the comment that he's overturned it. Maybe that's how. I'm all for ideas on this. And the more we can do to advance this industry for everybody, it's good for the whole. Please don't just hoard good ideas because they're your idea. I would highly recommend getting them out. As always, here's my cell phone. Here's my email. Reach out whenever you need something, guys. I'm here. If you've got ideas for things you want for lunch and learns for me to talk about, let me know. I'm an open book. So thank you guys as always. I truly appreciate it. And everybody have a great weekend.